Hello, everyone, and welcome to Joyful Homemaking. We are so excited to be with you. I know I say that every time, but it is a joy, and it's a joy to be able to encourage you listening, but also it's just a joy to be here conversating with my dear friend Ashley. I just leave these podcast sessions feeling so encouraged and rejuvenated, probably because I'm an extrovert and probably because Ashley has the best wisdom ever. So I'm really excited about today's topic. We kind of talked a little bit about it, that we were going to talk about it last podcast, and that is kind of looking at the different styles in specifically comparing homeschooling to private education. But as Ashley is going to kind of explain here in a moment, we are not talking about all private schools, but specifically we're going to be looking at a sect of the private schools. Right, Ashley?
Yes. So I have the most relevant experience is with a classical Christian school. I have worked at a different private school, but that was it was like the year it was starting up. It was a very different sort of situation. And so I don't think I have a very good handle. Like, I don't think I could speak to private schools in general. But we'll be talking here about classical Christian education and I realize there's also CC, right? Like classical conversation. So you could do that as a homeschool model, but we're talking about brick and mortar classical Christian school. So yeah. And I think too, just before we get started, I just want to make it clear, like, this isn't a debate. We're not like trying to prove one or the other, right? Like, I am pro homeschool. I am also pro classical Christian school. I think Marissa would probably say the same thing.
Yes.
This is like informational, what we have experienced, what our families have experienced. This is, as Marissa always says, which is so wise, this is descriptive, not prescriptive. We're not telling you what you need to do. This is information that we hope will be helpful.
Yes, and we do say this a lot, that all the information that we are going to be talking about today is just for pondering. It's just for putting some information into your bucket of, I wonder what is the right decision for our family. And ultimately, though, you need to, as a wife listening today who homeschools is considering homeschooling or private schooling, needs to go to your husband, and that needs to be first and foremost the conversation. But what I find really helpful when I do go to my husband to talk about something is having, like what Ashley said, just kind of an awareness of what different pictures look like, so that I can participate in the conversation. And then when he asks me, like, well, what do you know about this? Or what do you think about this? Then I am prepared for an answer. Ashley and I are very passionate that we should be well informed, and that we should be an equal part in the participation of the conversation that leads to decisions, but that our husbands are the head of our household. Did I say that right, Ash?
Yep. Okay, absolutely.
Good. So, now that we got all our disclaimers out of the way, because we always do that, and I think it's sometimes really funny. I was actually reading, now I'm going to have a brain moment here and can't remember the actual scripture that I was reading specifically, but it was Paul talking, and he didn't give any disclaimers. He just like jumped right in. And at the time, I don't think people needed disclaimers. You would just take what was relevant to you and your family, and you would carry on. But I do know that we are speaking to women, and as women, we can become emotional or personalize things, or not look at it as just information, and so I think it is good that we are saying this, but I do want you to know, if we haven't said a disclaimer, and that you need to hear, just say it to yourself, and then let's carry on. So we are going to be talking about kind of looking at homeschooling first. Ashley and I have the most years participating in homeschooling environments. Ashley alluded to classical conversations, which is a maybe probably would fall more into the co-op camp. And I've definitely participated in that, as well as some other co-ops. And Ashley, as she said, has participated in 2 different types of private schooling. And I believe, Ashley, you were telling me in the preschool realm, was that a private school that you did for your kiddos?
Oh, yes, that's
Okay.
right. Yeah. Yeah, I forgot about that. So each of my kids went to like a half day model private Christian pre-K, and it was while, I'd be homeschooling the older kids and I'd have my pre-Ker would go and
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, all of my kiddos did that, except for Natalie, of course, who I taught her pre-K class. So that was a little
Yeah.
bit different, but yeah.
She got
So
the best teacher for her pre-K.
yeah, she got the opinionated teacher.
But there's so many good things about both of these models, and so we are definitely going to be like covering just such the importance and joy of those different categories. But there are some, I guess you could call them cons or things to like look out for in both models as well. So those are going to be kind of ones we're going to talk about today. So I'll start with one for homeschooling, and then Ashley, I'll let you tell us something that was a benefit to you for homeschooling. But one of the things that our family is very passionate about is that when we are homeschooling, we get to teach and learn from a biblical worldview. And that, though, you also have to know a con that goes with it is the responsibility that the parents carry in that is significant. You need responsibility over the planning, over the teaching, over record keeping, and oversight, because if you are teaching with a biblical worldview, some states don't count that as being educated appropriately. So it comes with a pro and it comes with a con. What do you think about that?
Yeah, and I would, yeah, definitely agree with that. I think in terms of, so I think that the only way that we teach Christian kids is with a biblical worldview, right? Like that's only the
Yes.
only acceptable way to teach children. And so you're going to want to do that, of course, at the home level or at the, oh dear, I'm getting a note put up in the window. Okay, nope, no popsicles right now. Love you. Okay, sorry. I just see this piece of paper in the window in front of me being raised. I was like, what? Okay, sorry everyone. We're moms all the time, even when we
All the
podcast.
time.
So anyway, lost my train of thought. Oh, okay. So biblical worldview is key, is vital, right? No matter how you are educating your kids. And if your kids are going to any sort of school, you better make sure those educators are also educating them from a biblical worldview and perspective, because that really, anything else, like if you're teaching them anything, you have to start with truth. We know that truth is the word of God. So you really can't teach, right? You're not ever rightly teaching unless you're teaching starting with that biblical Christian worldview. So, but I completely agree that as a homeschooler, when you're looking, you're realizing this is all on me. It is, like you're saying, it's so much responsibility, because you need to be raising your children in the nurture and admonition of the Lord, the paideia of the Lord, right? Regardless of whether they go to school or not, you're doing that at home, you're discipling them at home. But then if you're also in charge of their like academic education and you're figuring out that from your worldview, then yes, it is a huge responsibility and a huge amount of work. Obviously completely worth it.
Yeah.
But yes, it's a lot. Yeah.
And there is like nuance that comes with the biblical worldview. We would all agree that to be evangelical, Protestant Christians, that we would all hold to the five solas, right? Like that is the standard. That is what you have to do to be called a Christian. However, there are different perspectives when it comes to worldview. Ashley and I were actually just talking about this when it comes to like eschatological perspectives, and that sometimes can be woven into your education as well. So there is some really good opportunities when you are the primary teacher, and when you're not the primary teacher, like if you are doing a classical approach, which we should actually have you explain a little bit about your specific school here when we wrap up the homeschooling portion. But since the teachers, from my knowledge, have to sign a statement of faith and what they will teach perspective-wise in the vast classical education, maybe not just Ashley's, but like if we're looking at private school in general, that can come with different nuance or different perspectives on things like creation, end times, even heaven and hell. Some different denominations feel differently. So it is important, both when you're homeschooling and if you're going to somewhere, even church, in my opinion, that you know the perspective that's being taught. And for homeschooling specifically, it's also important for whatever curriculum you purchase. I am going to say something that will probably make a lot of people sad, so I'm sorry, Ashley, I'm saying it here. But there are some curriculums that present themselves as Christian, but come from maybe people of different faith, like the Latter-day Saints or things like that. And you have to have your discernment eyes on. You have to be, like you said, put in the work. There's a lot of responsibility that comes with it. And so that is something that is a pro for sure, but also comes with a great responsibility.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, so true. I think actually that's what I would say. One of the things that I love the most about homeschooling is that you get to choose the curriculum, that you can be so creative, because there are so many curriculums out there. If you're a superhuman like Marissa, you just make up your own curriculum, no big deal. Which we should totally we should do like just a little plug for that too. If people are thinking this homeschool thing sounds good and they want,
Thank you.
they want some sort of, just like the rails to drive on.
Yes.
That's not right. You know what I'm talking about. You know the metaphor I'm looking at. Anyway, but I do love that about homeschool, is that you can really tailor the curriculum to each child, to what you are interested in, to what you feel is the most important things for them to study. Obviously, there's a checkbox of the things that they should know by the time they graduate, but there are just so many options out there. And so, as you're saying, like, do be careful, be wise. Just because, I'm not going to name any names, but just because something is really pretty doesn't mean that it's a good, solid Christian curriculum. And I know that especially homeschooling moms, we like the things that are pretty and look fun and look nice. And so that can be really appealing to our eyes. But yeah, just be aware of and I will say too, I know we're trying to talk about homeschool right now, but before I forget, I would say same warning with a classical Christian school. Like there should be a parent interview, like, when you're applying to the school, and when there's the parent or family interview, you ask those hard questions. Do you guys take a stance on eschatological issues? Do you just ask those things. What sort of denominations would you say you actually don't belong here? I mean, you have to ask things like that. I think, even though I had already I had already signed the contract as a teacher, I believe at this point, or maybe not, I don't remember, but we knew I was going to teach there. And in the parent interview, I already knew so much about where this school stood on so many different things, but I still asked, like, how do you teach boys and girls differently? What does that look like in this school? And I think those things are it's really important, because that might be something that you take for granted, that you assume everybody would think the same way. but they don't. And especially coming from homeschooling, we're in this co-op where everyone is so like-minded. And then you might go to a school where they're not. So anyway, so just be aware of that in curriculum, be aware of that in a school. But I love that about homeschool. You can really pick and choose. That also becomes a con when there's so many options out there. And especially if you have 4 or 8 children, however many children you may have, and you're like, I want to tailor this to each of my individual children. Sometimes that's really not an option too. You just need to figure out like what is going to work,
Yeah.
and then go with that. But that won't work for the next child, or you want to find something different. So that freedom though in curriculum is it's fun. It's really,
It
yeah,
is.
it's definitely a pro.
I loved your
Yeah.
warnings though about it and about like even too frequently changing curriculums. You could inadvertently create holes for your children because the curriculum is all made to be progressive and they know what they're going to hit. But if you switch to another curriculum, you might miss something, So I get that. And I like that warning. I think it's very wise. I think that one of the things I love about homeschooling and that I do like what I hear from you too, Ashley, with your specific private Christian education is the flexibility of schedule, where in homeschooling, it definitely allows you to prioritize family rhythms or travel, or like for us, like farm or household life. Definitely if you have any like ministries that you're involved in, even appointments, like when I've been pregnant and needed to do doctor's appointments quite frequently, homeschooling was very helpful for that. I like the flexibility that it is for individual needs. Like if you have a child that needs to take a break at a certain time, or when I was younger, I went to public education, but when I was younger, the schedule that the school had meant that my second grade year, the lunch, I was in the latest lunch, and I was starting to get headaches and having to go home frequently in the mid-morning time period. And my mom brought me to the doctor, and the doctor's like, she's just hungry. Like, she just needs some food. I was just low blood sugar. And so anyways, I like the flexibility. Like, if there's a need, if there's a snack break, if someone is not feeling well that day, like, the power is in your hands for the flexibility. However, I think the con that comes with that is sometimes balancing that freedom, making sure that you're actually getting your lessons in and not having too much field trip time. Or even like there are the unschooling movement, which I am still learning about. And I do think when people are doing the unschooling method intentionally, that this is not what I'm talking about. But when it's an unintentional, like, oh, we're just going to have a free day and it's going to be unschooling. You know what I mean? Like, I think you have to be really careful because the power is in your hand as a homeschool mom.
Yes, I completely agree. Our family, for example, my husband hunts. So that happens in the fall. He wants to take the kids hunting. Well, it's actually like it's a big deal if you miss school at our school. Like it's actually really difficult to make up things. The classic like, did we do anything while I was gone, or did we do anything important in class? It's like we really make sure we do important things in class. Like the kids need to show up. And so anyway, that always is funny. I always find some memes to show the kids if they say anything like that. But anyway, but it's really difficult when you would like to take vacations during that time or take trips and you can't. And so that is such a nice pro of homeschooling. I would say another con is if you are not disciplined or you're having a hard time keeping your kids disciplined or on track. I feel like that's really where we would get to a lot of times with homeschool, especially when you have multiple people you're trying to wrangle and get them all doing lessons at the same time. It can be difficult to teach them that discipline, especially when you yourself, and I'm talking about myself here, like are not disciplining yourself. You're like, oh, wait, hold on. I just got to do a stretch and fold on my sourdough, and I just got to go switch over the laundry. And then you guys get started, and I'm going to go. And then check on the animals, and you come back and everybody's left the table and is playing Legos, which obviously then you have to go do the discipline. So you have to be disciplined, which is such a good lesson to learn for you and your children. But if you are just not a naturally disciplined person, it's gonna be rough, and you're gonna struggle with that. So and there's all sorts of ways to do that. And I think we've talked a little bit about that on the podcast too. I feel like
Yeah.
maybe we did a thing on something about homeschool or scheduling or that sort of thing, because there's all kinds of ways to do that. But that is a con, is if you always are like thinking other things sound like fun or look like fun, or you're creating busyness outside of home or outside of homeschool, and then before you know it, yeah, you haven't gotten through the lessons, and it's June and you'd like to have a
Yeah.
summer break. But
Yeah.
yeah.
I know my mother-in-law used to always say you have to be home to homeschool. And while I understand the notion of that, you can definitely do school on the road or in a trailer like I did for 18 months. But there is truth to that you cannot just be willy-nilly with it. You need to schedule. You need to have discipline. You need to take on the responsibility that comes with it. And I think that's also a pro and a con to both homeschool and private school is that there are some parents who, when they come and they look at homeschooling, they value a robust education. Just like I think a classical private Christian model values and teaches to a robust Christian education. But there are also in homeschooling some moments where they're like, well, this is, just life schooling, or we don't need to know this X, Y, and Z because of whatever. And I just say that as a cautionary tale, like we should be doing our due diligence to our children, both girls and boys, teaching them what they need to know for life and godliness, and realizing that the vast amount of the subjects are from God. Everything is unto him, right? Like, so literature, when we study literature, we see his character, we see his truth. We can be able to learn things like poetry and allegories and things like that transform when we're reading scripture, or help us to know, like I said, know his character more. Science tells us about his creation, history, all of the things, they connect to God, and they shouldn't be left out, is what I'm trying to say with my mumbly words today. No, everyone's going to be like, you're the homeschool mom? No.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I know I cautiously start talking about the unschooling movement also, because I think that's how you get, kids that are in upper elementary that still can't really read well, is when you have, we're just unschooling. We learn by going to the grocery store and playing outside. And you're like, yes, there are so many lessons to be learned by going to the grocery store and playing outside. However, like there is some knowledge, there is some wisdom that you actually do need to sit down and look at a book and read and learn, or be taught a lesson, work out the math problems. And we really, as Christians, our children should be the best educated people like they should be better educated than their secular peers. And I don't mean that, I don't mean that I'm just, when you look at government schools and the way they truly are just failing in every sense of the way. They're failing, I should say, they're failing our children academically and socially and emotionally and spiritually. They are completely succeeding in what they're setting out to do, which is to drive their agendas. And because they are failing in all of the ways that we care about, we should be striving to make sure that our children are extremely well educated and not just know how to go to the grocery store or play outside. So yeah, so I would definitely say I would warn against unschooling, and I would say if you are looking to homeschool, like make it a rigorous education. Make sure your kids are getting educated well. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I think you brought up a really good point too that reminded me that we should be giving our kids the best education. And yet there are still children that will struggle in certain areas, certain subjects. And one thing that is nice about homeschooling is that you can tailor to their needs. Tailor if it's a certain subject, tailor if it's a struggle point, tailor if they just need more teaching on a certain concept. As I was a public school teacher for 5 years prior to having children, that is very challenging to do in a classroom setting where you are teaching to a large amount of children, to make it specifically tailored to a need of a child. So that definitely can be a pro, but also in a private school setting, and something I did witness in the public school is that when you do teach to the highest level in the room, not the lowest level, to the highest level in the room, then those that are not to that level do rise to the level. You know, they are challenged because it is presented to them in a different way. So I have also recognized that in both home education and private education.
Yeah, that's true. And actually, now that you say that, I guess I'm thinking like, oh yeah, I did that in homeschool even. Like I would choose a curriculum, like even for my kids that maybe were lumped together in history or something. It's like I would choose a curriculum that was to the higher grade, and then the
Yeah.
lower grades might listen to the stories or follow along, and they might not get everything. And I would tailor like the worksheets and, the different the assignments that went along with it. I would tailor it to their grade and their level. But I think it's kind of that trickle down effect, and hopefully they're getting, they're getting something out of it, and it might be more than if I had just read them a book that was tailored to their grade or whatever. So yeah, that's a good point. I will say, yeah, and to go along with that, that is definitely a con with, well, any sort of brick and mortar education, right? Is that the curriculum is very rigid. There is a very specific curriculum. That's what they use. They're not going to tailor it to your kid because you don't like the curriculum, which even after working in a school for 1 year, what parents don't like, what curriculums. Like they're going to let you know what books they don't like, or this is not what I want. Anyway, so but it's a very rigid curriculum, and but it is a really good curriculum too. Like they're learning at a rigorous pace at a high level. Like it's a lot of information, but it's done in a way that it's presented to them in an orderly way that hopefully their brains can organize depending on the age that they are and the level that they're at. And that's something that's specific to like the classical model. And so, yeah, so I think that, that's another a pro and con for a classical education would be it's a rigid curriculum, but it's a really good curriculum. So, yeah.
Oh, that's good. I also think a pro for homeschooling is that the time. The time that you get with your kiddo, and that has many effects, like the parent-child relationship, those heartstrings that are being made, the sibling relationship where you're with your siblings all day, and then also the friend relationship where you get to be specific about who that your kids are spending time with. Those things are all very positive elements of homeschooling. However, the con of that, or the area that I would caution as a homeschool mom, is that there is a temptation to not pursue friendships or to not pursue even relationships with your child or encourage sibling relationships. Sometimes we forget to put margin in our day. I just did actually a podcast on my Raising Rices this that will come out this week, and it's all about leaving time to make relationships. You can, even though you have a flexible schedule, you can fill it with so many things that you don't make time to connect with your kids, or you don't have time in your schedule where you are encouraging that sibling play and that sibling relationship. And you might not be also putting in your schedule time to seek out other believing families that you want to cultivate friendships between the two of that maybe their family and your family. So that would be a pro and a con, I think.
Yes. Yeah, I completely agree. And uh sorry, I'm getting random messages. I think again, we have a little bit of a unique blessing of a situation because we are at a classical Christian school that is a half day model. And I know, and also I teach there. And so I'm, I'm around, my secondary students, I'm around them all day. My younger kids, I'm not with them during that school time. But aside from that, we are together a lot. We are together all the time, and then of course they have homework at home, and for the elementary, that is an extremely hands-on for the parent. And so I'm all afternoon like doing lessons with them and going over, their catechisms and memorization, and doing math facts and helping them with their homework in the afternoon. And so again, that's just I think that's a really unique model. I don't think there are a lot of classical Christian schools that are that half day model. And so I feel really blessed and a little bit
Yeah.
spoiled that ours is. It's wonderful. And then that, of course, does, so the expectation is that the parents would be working at home with the kids in the afternoon, not to mention then you're just home more of the time, right? Because you're really only in school. I mean, school is a little over 4 hours. I think it is 4 hours for elementary. I don't know. Anyway, so yeah, so but that is a con if it is that all day model and you're not with your children, right? And then like you better have asked those hard questions in your parent intake interview. You better make sure that you know who's with your kids, who's teaching your kids, what they're learning. And that's actually a lot of work too, just to keep up with everything that's going on, especially with multiple kids in school. Like, what are they learning in this subject? What's going on in this subject? What did your teacher say about this? What's happening? I mean, it is a lot of work. And I think, like you said, carving out specific time with, if you can, with each child. I know that's not always possible, but sometimes that doesn't happen in homeschooling because you think we're all home, we're all together all the time, all day long. I don't, and so you just think, why would I need specific time with each child? But that has been something I've had to be really intentional about now that they're in school. And of course, it's difficult because a lot of the times when I'm with a child, I'm with all four of them. So, we're all in the car together or we're all doing something. But anyway, but I did, I had different things I would try to do throughout the year. So anyway, but yeah, that's definitely can be a con for private school. If you're sending your kid to private school, you just flat out have less time with them. So, yeah. And I know sometimes too, I think we can do this with anything. We could do this with a classical school, but we can also do this with homeschooling, is that we have an idea in our mind of what it will look like. Like in my mind, my classical or my homeschool would have been a really relaxing, peaceful time of me doing read alouds and us all sort of having discussions about them and, I don't know, maybe sketching something and going to the library and finding extra exciting books about our topic, and me having really in-depth conversations with each kid about it. And frankly, it didn't always look exactly like I would have wanted it to. And so I think, you have to be realistic too about what things actually are. Like if your kid is in school 4 hours a day, is that 4 hours that you really would be spending hanging out with them and teaching them? Or is that 4 hours that they can be gaining information and then come home and tell you all about it, So, yeah.
Yeah, I do think your school is very unique in the half-day model, and it's lovely. I'm really glad that you found something like that, and that you're there. Like, you know the people that your kids are hanging out with, you know their families, you know what the teachers are teaching, and that would be something to take into account if you're considering a private Christian classical education is, are you present? Are you there? Or are, like, that is something to factor in too. Do you know someone that's there? Do you know them intimately? I also think a positive that definitely could go both ways, but I have found in homeschooling is that there is like the practical education piece. I know we kind of like poo-pooed unschooling, but there is a lot of opportunities to learn from like gardening or homemaking or finding, a neighbor and learning a trade skill with, or special interests and music and those types of things. And it's not just exclusive to homeschooling, but there is that time allowance piece. If you're looking at being home with your kid. So I think that has been a positive. I know that juxtaposing that against a private Christian school, what the things that I've heard Ashley communicate about is that there are those extracurricular opportunities in like team sports or choir or things like that. And that is a blessing that it is so accessible in a private Christian education system.
Yes. Yeah. And first of all, I do love that we have sports and theater and choir and all the things that, some of it is extracurricular. Choir is required. They're just, if you're in high school, or middle school, you're in choir. But it is because we have school in the morning, and then we have sports in the afternoon, and then come home, homework, dinner, try to get to bed at a decent time. I'm looking at our year going, I actually don't know if we're going to be able to do music lessons because again, that flexibility and that time piece. I also know when I look back at my homeschool, maybe I wasn't spending as much time as I should have doing school each day with my kids. So I'm not saying that just because you homeschool, you can do it all, every extracurricular, like Marissa said, you have to be home to homeschool, you have to leave that time. But you do sort of have to choose. And because we're part of the school, I was like, we're all in with this school. So we will do the sports with the school, we'll do the theater with the school. We might not do music lessons, we'll see. My kids have had background in music lessons, and they have a really good music program at the school, but they don't have like band, or they're not doing musical instruments. So so it's just something to consider. Again, that flexibility and time piece, you're going to have so much more of that with homeschooling. And I want to say really quickly too, just one thing, I'm going back to being in the school, the fact that I get to be in the school, that I get to see everything, all the behind the scenes, and that's at the secondary, right? At the elementary school, I have a good friend who's a mom, and she's there all the time, and she knows all the people, and she can tell me all the things. So it's nice to have like eyes and ears in the school. Our school in particular, we rely heavily on parents for volunteering. And I just think that's so great and important, because then every parent, or at least the mom or the dad of each student, is in the school like every week, basically coming in and helping and correcting things or grading papers. For the elementary, they sit in the back of the classroom. And so they're just there hearing everything and aware of everything that's going on. And I think that is a blessing, honestly. I mean, I know it takes time out of the schedule of the parents, but I would just say, if your school doesn't have mandatory, like required volunteer hours, volunteer at your school. Like it really is important to be there. And it's really nice for the teachers too. And that, you could be doing anything. We have there's an elementary dad that comes to the secondary, and he cleans our bathrooms.
Wow.
Like, talk about a man that is doing the Lord's work. It is like, and he hangs things and, puts things together. If we have bookshelves or something, like, he's just like, that's kind of his volunteer thing. And that's just such a blessing to have people that are coming and doing things like that. So I would say just be involved in the school as much as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also would say that for homeschooling, one thing that is really something that's really important to me is that I am training in educational skills and knowledge, but I'm also training in character development. And that's not to say that Christian schools don't, but that there's a heavy influence on that for me in our daily homeschool schedule, and that's been really important. But I'm also noticing that as my children are getting older, and I have a little younger children than Ashley's kiddos, but one thing that has been really on my mind a lot for specifically my older boys is the power of a male teacher, a male leader. And Darren, my husband, does a fabulous job with it and definitely takes the lead in that. But I can see, I can't predict the future, but I can foresee coming a time that our homeschool will shift to where our boys specifically will be doing more check-ins with dad and more, overviews of what they're learning with him. And I read this book from Vodi Bakum, and he speaks to that a lot about he homeschooled his kiddos, him and his wife, and when they got to a certain age, they would leave mom, they would leave that oversight of mom in the homeschooling, and they would move into independent study, but it would be under dad's oversight. And I think I have that like tickling my mind right now, and so I could see in a private Christian classical education that having those male teachers could be really helpful, especially if there is a situation in a homeschool environment that the dad doesn't have the time or ability to be the oversight for his young men growing up. So I don't know, what does that look like, Ashley? Actually, I don't think I've ever asked you like male female teachers in the secondary level and how that looks. I'm so sorry, I should have asked you.
No, yeah, no, it's we do have several male teachers at secondary, and they're phenomenal. They're so great. Like I wish I could take their classes because I'll hear them even like walking past their classrooms and I'm like, man, they're having so much fun in there. Like I'm so thankful they're at the school. Like they're a huge blessing, and I'm so thankful. I mean, it is great. I think, for young ladies to have male teachers, that's a good dynamic. It's good for them to, maybe have another male figure in their life aside from their dad, especially these are men that I trust, obviously, and the school trusts. But then for your sons, like that is just so important. I just think that is vitally important rather than to have just the ladies teaching you and telling you what to do, through until James will graduate and turn 19 a month later. So it's like to be an almost 19-year-old young man and just have all female teachers still, it doesn't feel right. So, I'm very thankful for the male teachers and influences at the school. I'm sure that the school would be happy to have more, but that's just, that's hard because it's hard to make a really decent living to support a family. And I know that is a big goal for the school, is to be able to attract permanent, good teachers that can, like a man could come and work full time at the school and support his family. And so I know that's something that they would love to do, but they also want to keep tuition costs down, which is also wonderful and a blessing. So anyway, it's just a hard, you can't do it all. But anyway, I'm very thankful for those male teachers. And I will say, just in terms of having older kids. So I did ask all of my kids, I was like, hey, Mrs. Rice and I, we're going to do this conversation. I was like, we're not going to say one's better than the other because that's not true. Like they're both wonderful, and I think all the kids need to come out of government schools and either be homeschooled or part of a classical Christian. And I say that as such a broad, I also know that there are very specific cases where people maybe they have a child with special needs, or they have different. So I'm not saying, just in general, that would be wonderful if most people could do that. But so I was explaining to them, we're going to have this conversation about the two different types of schooling. Um, what would you guys say are like, are there any pros or cons, or what did and of course, it's a lot of the comfort things for my children that they preferred homeschooling, like, oh, we could sleep in, we didn't have to wear a uniform, I could be in my warm-ups all day long. And I'm like, okay, guys, like, this is not making our homeschool sound like we were really serious. But I actually have a friend that does have her kids wear uniforms for homeschooling, which is
Wow.
so awesome. I love it so much. Like, they have to have like their polo, their slacks on, and be ready at 8 a.m. So talk about discipline, you could, like, it can be done. But anyway, but one of the things they talked about, especially my older kids, is and you touched on this earlier too, is the social aspect. Like, the older kids get, the more they just want to be around people their age. I mean, I remember that in high school. You just want to be with your friends all the time. You just want to be with people your age all the time. And again, co-ops are a great way to do that if you're homeschooled, like, and you can, and you're going to have youth group one day a week. It's not like my kids were not around other kids their age when they were homeschooled, but they love that aspect of it. And I will say also, there's a lot of really great online Christian schools, including like Christian classical schools, that you can do, that my son was doing before, for middle school, before we switched to the brick and mortar school. And we were talking about that a little bit, and he said, one other kid put it, he's like, it's kind of the worst of all the worlds, because if you're in this online school, you don't have that flexibility that you do with homeschool, because you're still this many hours a day, you're sitting at your computer in these Zoom classes. So you don't have the flexibility. He's like, but you also don't really have the friends, because they're all like through the screen, And I was like,
No.
oh, I never like thought about it that way. So it's like, even if your kids are doing online school, it's just important to get them together with kids in person, and hang out. And of course my kids have their siblings, and they love hanging out with each other too most of the time. But that is, that has been one pro. And con to go along with that, some of the kids might not be the kids that you really want your kids to become best friends with. So that's another reason it's important to be really aware of who's in their class, who their family, like what's going on there and the dynamics. But yeah, so
Very wise.
yeah.
Well, I only have two more things on my list here, Ashley. So, sorry, I was going to have us transition to private school. We've just been talking about it all the whole time. So that's great.
Yeah, I know. I was like, I kind of feel like we just got to intermingle the two.
I like it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I think that would be a pro for private Christian classical education is that the teachers, and you talked a little bit about this with the male teachers, but that the teachers have been very studious in studying the subjects that they're teaching, and very specific to what they're teaching. And so I think that is a wonderful pro. I was just putting my book list together for my children for homeschooling, and I'm like, I haven't read all these books. Do I have time to read all of my kids' book lists for the year? And so that is definitely a pro for the private classical Christian setting, is that they have put the work in. It is their quote unquote job to do it, and so they have spent time doing it and preparing it for your children, and that's a lovely thing. I think that's a great thing.
Yeah. Oh, it's and I can speak to this very truthfully. It is so much work. It is so much work to try to know your subjects inside and out, so that you can you can teach it as best as you possibly can to your students. And I mean, there's a lot that I had to learn, in order to teach it. And so, but it's been a blessing. But you definitely you have to at least be an expert. Even if I'm not an expert on all of history, I better be an expert on the history that I am teaching to these kids this year, or I may not be an expert on all literature, but I have to be an expert on these books that I am teaching to these grades this year. So, yeah, and that was, I mean, that was part of the reason we started to think about doing the online school, because I just did not feel equipped to teach every subject all through high school. I'm like, I can't do it. And I know that some moms and parents are like, I can do it. I know these subjects and I can do it all through senior year. And I'm like, wow, that is amazing. I'm hats off to you, because I just don't think I could, especially when it comes to like some of the science, the upper sciences and upper math levels. Yeah, that'd be tricky. So anyway, yes,
Yeah.
that is a pro for sure.
I definitely do not feel equipped to teach it, but I am working diligently to teach how to raise learners. So hopefully that they can
Yes.
learn how to learn those things. But I really appreciated that you pointed out there are lots of resources too. Like there are, and what a blessing. My husband was homeschooled and he did not have those types of resources when he was growing up. So it's so exciting to see through private Christian classical education, through online Christian learning, and through different curriculums in homeschooling. They've come such a far ways. So that is just so fun.
Yeah. Awesome.
The last thing I wrote, Ashley, and it is a pro and a con, is tuition. I know as a matter of fact that I can say this, and everyone would agree, that when you put your money somewhere, that you have high expectations of what comes out from that money. And so if you want to put your kids in a private Christian classical school and you are paying money for that, then you are going to, as a family, rise to that price value that you are investing. And so it is definitely a pro. But then also it could be a con depending on your family size. Like in my mind, and I know you teach, and so that is wonderful for the budget. But like if you were not teaching, for example, and you put 8 children into a Christian classical school, I would have to win the lottery, or think of some creative ways. So pros and cons, right, with that.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And I think, again, very blessed with our school. Our school is very reasonable, and they wanted to be reasonable. That was one of their goals. That's why we don't have our own building. We're in churches. That's why, I mean, there's different ways that we just save money at our school, and it's because they didn't want tuition to be so high for all of these families with one working adult and then one stay-at-home parent. And they knew that those families needed a good option. And so again, very thankful. I realize that that's not all classical Christian schools. And yes, and like you're saying, I also have a tuition discount, a very generous tuition discount, because I am a full-time teacher. I have my salary, which we were just hoping would like cover, we're like, maybe it'll cover tuition, maybe not quite, and we can pay. And anyway, it's just, the Lord was so good to work that all out financially. Because I mean, obviously I'm not working there for the money. Like it's not what it's about at all. But it just, yeah, it was just worked out really well. So I totally agree. And I know that some people are like, we just flat out can't afford it. Like we wouldn't be able to. And that's, I mean, and I think, I'm sure some schools, I really don't know about ours. I probably should. I'm sure some schools offer financial assistance. I know that there are, I think it was on the Logos website, like the Logos brick and mortar up in Moscow, that said like something about, we will never turn people away because they cannot pay for this
Yeah.
education, basically. So they must have donors, or I don't know how they're doing it. So I wouldn't, if you really feel like your family is called to, maybe you have an amazing classical Christian school in the area, but you don't know how it would ever work with tuition. I don't know. Figure it out. You just never know. You can talk to the school, talk to the administration, see if they're, what that looks like in terms of financial aid, if they have a position maybe that's available. I mean, heck, I'd be a janitor at this school if they would let my kids go, like why not? If it means my kids could get this education. I think whether it's time, money, resources, whatever it is, so whether you're homeschooling, whether your kid's education is the number one thing you should be investing in. You should be investing, yeah, again, time, resources, money. I mean, obviously, their faith, their spiritual life
Yeah.
is most important. But I'm in terms of like things here on this earth, like this is what you need to be investing in, and it will be a huge investment. It's going to be a huge cost, and that's okay. Like that, it should be. So yeah, that's what I'd say.
Yeah. So many good points, and I'm so sure there's so many more things that we could say pros and cons about private and public and homeschool. They're just all, and it, like you said, it kind of depends where you are. It depends what your things that are available. For example, your school is locally based where you are living, and it's such a great, I love the half day model. I love the standards in which they require their students to meet, and there's so many more things we could say too. And so I just really hope that this podcast was just kind of very thought-provoking and helped, no matter what decision you land on, and it can change year to year, wherever you're at, that you might have pulled something away from our conversation today to be like, hey, this is what I can do this year to better my private or to better my homeschooling. Like, this is what I can do. And then this is what I should be thinking about as my kids get older too. And how to prioritize, like you said, their education through your time and resources and money. So thank you, Ashley. This was so fun. And I got to learn more about your school through it too. So that was super special.
I know, it has been great. I did realize too, after all of this, I'm like, I actually never really even explained what a classical model is, but there's lots of resources out there. But you should quickly, I know you have like a minute, but what resources, you have resources for homeschoolers. Do you have a minute to tell our audience about your resources?
1 minute. No kidding. Yes, I do. I put together what I call Fundamentum, which is a foundational guide for your homeschooling. It's definitely a guide. You will still need other parts to the curriculum, but it helps go over your faith element. So things like catechisms and apologetics. We go over hymns, and we take time to talk about the character of God in the books of the Bible and the different writing styles of the Bible, etc. So we have a big, robust faith element, and then we isn't also included into it a few subjects as well as some extracurricular things like movement breaks and watercolors and things like that. So it's called Fundamentum, and if I'll put a link. I'll remember to put a link in this podcast for you to go check it out. I am in the process of rebranding from it's called Raising Rices to the Heritage Household, and in that there'll be a lot more courses and resources to help you specifically with homeschooling. But yeah, that is what I have. I'm so excited about it. And if you are in the greater Portland area and you want to check out a private classical Christian school, Ashley, can you tell us about where they should go look for Paideia?
Yeah. I don't know what the website is, actually, because there's more. I mean, because Paideia is kind of a word that is used often for classical schools. If you just look up Paideia Classical Christian School, you might find one in like Florida or something. But yeah, so ours is in Oregon. And honestly, we're actually not the only classical Christian school in the Portland area. We're just the best classical Christian school in the Portland area. I mean, a little bit biased, but I'm sure the other ones are great too. I don't know. I only see them when we play them in sports, but I think we're actually getting together with some of them for teacher training this year. So that should be kind of interesting. Yeah. So anyway, but they really are all over the country. They're everywhere. So you can look them up. You can look up through the ACCS website, the Association of Classical Christian Schools, which is actually how I found our school probably 7 or 8 years ago. and we weren't a part of it until this last year, just the way the Lord worked. But yeah, there's a lot of great resources. Doug Wilson has a couple different books, Recovering the Lost Tools of Learning, about classical education, and Dorothy Sayers' whole model of classical Christian education, and the book that she wrote about that. And then the Case for Classical Education, or Case for Classical School, something like that. Anyway, also by Doug Wilson. It's great. And then there's a book called Classical Me, Classical Thee by Rebecca Merkel. And that is a book that is geared toward students, that explains to them why their parents chose this education for them. And that actually might be an interesting read even for parents too, just to see why would you choose this. So anyway, those are some resources if you are interested in learning more about classical education. I'm sure there's websites, etc. I don't know. Anyway, yeah.
We're professional, remember? We know everything about
I came with my resource list, but not. Anyway, yeah. Yeah.
Well, this has been really fun. Thank you so much.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, listeners. Sorry, we're over our time. Marissa has to go. She has important things to do and drop-offs to make. So, okay. All right. Thanks, friends.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.